All right, so what are the digital humanities?
So digital humanities can be a tough term to define because there's lots of different perspectives on it. But for me, it really is taking computing tools and bringing them to bear in disciplines that look at the human experience. So that's kind of the thing that I like to focus on. So to enhance scholarship, to give new ways to create things, to be innovative, right? To not just do those things, but also critically look at the impact of the choices that computing tools make us come to grips with when we do those things. So capable of amazing projects in digital humanities, but also there are a lot of challenges in the way those tools are constructed, so the way computing does what it does. And so I think digital humanities is the whole gamut of understanding humanities first, right? What are we trying to do? How can computers potentially enhance that? And what are the decisions we make in choosing to adopt some of those tools? And what kinds of things can we create both as expressions of human experience, but also maybe as critical tools that could be used in our other scholarship.
So before we added structures or anything into the actual scene, all we added was terrain, and then we inserted a character that we found in the asset store. But we wound up having to scrap her because we realized, as you can see us struggling right now, that she did not have a skeleton. And a skeleton is what enables a model to move and be able to pretty much function. So we wound up scrapping her and just using a basic first-person camera. But you can see me trying to insert a camera to attach to her, but it was giving us some difficulties.
Although this initial model did not contain a skeleton, we decided to practice manipulating the camera to figure out the best way to mount it within the model's skull, which would give the player the first-person view we wanted to achieve. When the camera is mounted, it is attached to a specific set of coordinates on XYZ axes, and to make sure that the camera was perfectly centered, it needed to be dragged into the exact position where it would be mounted. After finding an easier way to incorporate a first-person camera that centered it into an invisible skeleton, we decided this method was not worth the struggle. The only downside to the new method we discovered is that the player does not have an innate form or model attached to the camera, meaning that from the first-person view, the camera is floating if the player looks down to try and see the rest of their own body.
What does it mean to build a spatial narrative, and what is spatial storytelling?
So spatial storytelling, and through that the creation of spatial narrative, that is the notion that elements of a story are tied to specific places. Now, because we are spatial creatures, right, we move through the earth and we construct our own story of our experience every day. So a spatial narrative is one that leverages our tendency then to tie events, emotions, to specific places. So if you embed those already in a story that you create, and as your audience, your people who are reading your story, looking at your story, experiencing your story, then they take those elements as they move through and construct their own narrative. And one of the keys about spatial narrative then is it doesn't have to be linear. So you can experience those elements in your own version of exploration. So every experience can be unique. It can also be guided. So the key to spatial storytelling and spatial narratives are understanding the importance of place, how we move through place, and how we can attach story elements to places to construct narrative or narratives.
In this final clip, we've decided to give a brief walkthrough of the environment we've created so far. After remodeling and reconstructing our environment several times, we finally found a layout that we were happy with. Each room was constructed uniquely, where no two rooms have the same positioning of props for the rooms that can be entered. We decided to indicate which rooms can and cannot be entered through the use of leaving certain doors ajar, signaling that the room can be entered. In this clip, we also had just begun to experiment with dynamic lighting, and as you can see in one of the rooms where we incorporated a light, we are able to control the exact areas in which we want it to illuminate and change the level of illumination. These subtle effects are not too difficult to incorporate, but make an immense difference in the immersion the player experiences. Manipulating how the player perceives the environment changes the narrative and the way that the player perceives the narrative at hand.